Hello, good morning. There's a marine layer rolling in right now, so my lighting is kind of spotty, gets a little dark, a little bright, but if you want natural light, it's just something that we deal with. I was just out in my backyard, just watching the bees, the bumblebees, big black bumblebees, honeybees, wasps, hornets, watching all the butterflies. We live kind of out in the hills outside Los Angeles, and we have a lot of flowering trees in the yard. It's nice to just go out there in the morning and take my matcha and just watch everything going on. Very relaxing way to start the day. And now I've come inside to bitch about reissues of albums recorded in the 1970s. So, for those of you who are interested in evolutionary biology, I would like to start with a little story. So let's go back to our hunter-gatherer days, and let's imagine that you and I are walking through the forest, and from behind us we hear Now, in under a second, this amazing dance, the orchestration occurs between our auditory system and the receptors in our brains to process spatially where this sound originated from. We have to understand if this sound came from our 330, did it come from the 6? Was it 20 yards this way? Is it 5 feet behind me? And over hundreds of thousands of years, this ability has been honed so sharp in the human being. We would not be here today without the ability to discern the exact location, distance of sounds. And we also have to understand that when we hear that branch snap, was it created by something that weighs 250 pounds, or was it a rabbit stepping on a small twig? And so at that point we undergo extremely rapid processing of all of this external information, which leads me to sound recording. One of the hallmarks of a great classical or jazz recording, something made with acoustic instruments, is to capture those instruments in the real space in which they are being performed. Now, with prog albums or electronic music especially, it's interesting and extremely artistic to create artificial spaces which may not exist in nature, in which these sounds are being created. Perhaps spaces that are far too vast in scope, or spaces that are very tight, and also blending spaces, having sections of tightness with sections of vast openness, and blending them all together and creating a landscape for which these sounds to exist that is fictional. And again, in the capturing of live acoustic instruments, what I think most of us like and want to hear is the actual space they were recorded in, at the actual volumes they were played at dynamically, with the exact timbre of the instruments as they were played. So many people have messaged me and asked me, why is it that you think these Deutsche Grammophon Original Source records don't sound good? And I did watch one interview with Sidney Meyer, and from the information that I took from that, and I said this in the first review I did of that record, and I made some accusations about what I thought was happening, but I wasn't. I was guessing at it from just years and years of experience of being in a recording studio. But she said a few things that I thought were really interesting, and one was that it was cut really hot. They were really hitting the mastering tape deck hard. And, you know, depending on formula and brand and year of tape and what kind of machine you have, like I was saying before, a tape deck essentially is a compressor at volume. And this is, you know, you could ask any engineer this question. And so I think a lot of people say, oh wow, like the quieter detail is really brought forward, it's really brought up in the mix, and it's very dynamic, and there's a lot of bass in the recordings. And you know, that's just the side effect of the compression that comes from hitting the tape hard. Those are all of the symptoms right there. And you know, there's nothing wrong with that. Every engineer in the history of engineers is going to try and hit the tape hard when you're going from whatever you're going from, 4-track, 24-track, 12-track, down to a 2-track master. And it sounds great. You get a little bit of odd harmonic distortion in an analog field where it sounds warm, it creates a warmth. You get that head bump, gives it a little extra boost in the bass. Everyone's looking for that sound. The problem is that sound can very easily get a little bit overcooked. It's almost like when you're working in Photoshop and you want to sharpen a photo, and it's like a little bit of sharpening is great, and you go a little bit further and you overcook it a little bit and it starts to look fake. And I don't know about you, but for me, and even when I'm working on music of my own or whatever, a little bit too much compression gives me a sense of edginess. Like it, there's a natural relaxed quality to the recording, and then it gets just a little edgy. And I think these recordings suffer from that a little bit. And I think this one especially, I think in the Stravinsky it kind of works for it. And you know, I think that Stravinsky was aimed at a target audience that's probably more into rock music, or the same sort of market that will continue to buy remaster after remaster of the same Steely Dan record, which gets goosed up more and more and more each time. I don't think this series is really aimed for people who have spent a large amount of time listening to classical recordings. And the other thing that I gleaned from the interview was that in the 70s, when Deutsche Grammophon was recording the quadraphonic series, so basically in the front you probably have some form of the decatry and the outriggers and a few mics pointed down into the woodwinds and such. And then that 7, 8, whatever it is, microphones get sent down into the mixer onto 2 channels. The other 2 channels of a quadraphonic recording come from microphones placed in the back of the hall or mid-hall. And so if you had a quadraphonic setup, it would create the illusion that you were watching a performer here but you're also in the space because they've recorded what's behind you and you have speakers behind you and it plays that rear channel information. And what they said in the interview was they took those 4 channels and mixed them down to 2 channels, which for a quadraphonic recording is fine, it's great. But when you introduce information from the back of the hall after the instruments have bounced off the floor and the ceiling and the walls and everywhere, and stuff that came from this side of the stage is now being picked up in microphones on this side of the stage, and then you push that information into the front channels, to some extent inevitably going to get some sort of crosstalk and phase issues by doing that. And a lot of people have commented on, wow, this mix is so wide, it's so spacious. And my interpretation of this is that that rear channel information has now been transferred to left and right hard pan side information. And that's a way of creating that width this way and also creating a depth that way, where you feel like you can hear deeper into the mix, except that information is the polar opposite of the information that you're actually hearing. And in the video that I made, I was saying I felt like I heard the piano with like ghost notes coming out of this side, as the piano is predominantly here in the mix, kind of like at a 10 o'clock positioning. And when he's hitting the notes harder, I hear more come from over here. And I think that's just the bounce of that rear channel information coming out over here. And the interesting thing is, while he's playing piano, left hand, right hand, 10 o'clock, it's there, you have a good image of it. And then in certain passages, it seems almost like there's another piano doubling what he's playing, and that comes from here and it becomes like a split stereo mix. And when that happens, while I'm listening to the recording, you know, the hunter-gatherer in me is thrown off by this information because it doesn't make sense spatially. And this is why, you know, I think once you hear that, you can't unhear that. So then my mind is looking to hear that misinformation within the recording, which then at that point takes me out of the zone and the trance of listening to music, and it just spoils the recording for me, which is really unfortunate, you know, because on a lot of levels, I think there's a lot of really great work that went into these recordings, and I think most of it is pretty fantastic. But, you know, as they say, man, you know, the devil's in the details. And I believe that this same style exists on all 4 of the recordings that I've heard. I've ordered one more just for fun, and I'm going to give that a listen and see. And, you know, this is also something that, if this is a long series over the course of time, can completely be worked out. And just to wrap it up, you know, like I was saying before, these very compressed, big, bombastic recordings feel tense to me in the artificiality of it. And so I listened to this morning, pretty loud, and then directly after that, I put on the first disc from this Beethoven late string quartets recorded by Telefunken. And also, if you don't have late 60s, early 70s Telefunken recordings, they're just so phenomenal. And this recording of the quartet just sounded so natural, and the timbres were so precise and the positioning was precise and the size and the weight of each instrument was there. And I just felt like it was so relaxing and warm to listen to after this kind of overcooked hammering of the Deutsche Grammophon. And you know, that's my 2 cents on it. And if you're a recording engineer, a mastering engineer, someone like me who's just spent your life in studios and on tour and on stage, and you have an opinion about that, let me know if you agree, disagree, whatever. You know, the whole point of me saying this is I'm not trying to bash anyone or any label or any engineers. I think everyone is doing a great job. I'm just giving my 2 cents from what I hear. And, you know, the real point is just to have a conversation about it. You know, especially when things start to exist in kind of an echo chamber and they just keep going and going and going and no one has any other opinion about it. I just thought I would share mine, and I don't want to ramble on forever. I probably already rambled long enough. So thank you for watching this. Let me know what you think about my observations, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.